In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we have this one, Japeti Black. And if there's a celebrity on the front package, it's probably going to be me. But jokes aside, Japeti has never been my favorite ramen. I guess when Nongshim, so the parent company of Shin Ramen, saw the success of Shin Ramen Black, they decided to slap the black branding onto their other ramen lines. Looking at it, the only noticeable difference seems to be the larger dehydrated meat slices. Honestly, I actually like the cheap little meatballs in the regular Japeti, so hopefully they didn't ruin it by trying to upscale dehydrated meat. Tasting it, it's honestly just the same. Japeti has always been a bit too salty for me, and it doesn't even taste like jjajangmyeon. It just has its own weird, unique flavor. Adding an egg and dumpling really helps it, but as for the upgraded meat, it's alright. I mean, it's as good as dehydrated meat can get. But yeah, this is definitely no Shin Ramen Black. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we have this one. I actually filmed this one already. It's an interesting Korean take on Yakin Udon. Essentially, it has a sweet soy sauce based marinade but with a Korean twist and adds a peppery heat. According to the package, you can eat it hot or cold, and since I made it hot last time, I'm trying it cold today. The key thing here is to cook the noodles all the way through, something I, unfortunately didn't do. These noodles are on the thicker side, so they take a bit longer to cook, and since you rinse them in cold water, they stop cooking immediately after leaving the pot. And as you can see, mine were slightly undercooked, so I ended up turning this noodle dish back into a hot one by adding more water and trying to cook them through fully. But yeah, like my previous review, these noodles are pretty interesting. The sweet soy sauce marinade is balanced out with a nice black peppery heat, and the noodles themselves are thick and chewy. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we have this one, a more upscale, healthier ramen brand. The flavor is a Sichuan style jjajangmyeon, which is an interesting twist on a classic Korean Chinese noodle dish. But yeah, this brand seems to be positioning itself in the less saturated quote-unquote premium ramen category. That said, there's a reason why that category isn't so popular. When I want an instant ramen, I don't necessarily want it to be fancy. But cooking it, it's pretty simple. You just boil the noodles and rinse them. The sauce comes in these packets, which is nice since it's an actual sauce instead of a powder. However, when you squeeze it out, the texture and color aren't the most appetizing. After giving a good mix, it's ready to eat. Flavor-wise, it's quite fragrant. You get that signature Sichuan burn along with a strong peppery aroma. Personally, it's not my favorite, but if you enjoy that classic Chinese fragrant spice, this might be the ramen for you. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we have this one. It's another bibimbap, meaning there's no soup, you just mix it in a sweet and spicy sauce. This one comes from the same company that makes Ramen, which is a broth-based ramen. To cook it, you boil the noodles and then rinse them under cold water since this is a cold noodle dish. Just make sure the noodles are fully cooked before rinsing since the cold water stops the cooking. The only drawback with these types of noodles is that they usually don't come with many toppings, typically just sesame seeds and seaweed flakes. So I like to add a hard-boiled egg to make it more interesting and give it some actual nutrients. Once everything is ready, just add the sauce and mix it all together. Tasting it, it's pretty good, like most bibimbap, the noodles are on the thicker side and the sauce is a balance of sweet and spicy. I'd say this one leans more on the sweet side, but overall I'm confident that most people would enjoy this dish. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we have Chang Ramen or sesame seed ramen, and this one is one of my favorites. When I was younger, I wasn't a huge fan of toasty sesame seed flavor, but one day while snowboarding with a friend, I took a bite of his ramen and it completely changed my mind. The key to this ramen is the sesame oil packet that brings, those deep toasted sesame notes. Another interesting part is the dehydrated egg packet, which is pretty unique for an instant ramen. Tasting it, it's really good. Like the broth has that rich toasted sesame oil scent, which adds a warm nuttiness. If you want to cut through the richness, kimchi is the perfect addition, where the acidity balances everything out. Lastly, the dehydrated egg is interesting. It has a slight sweetness, and honestly, I'm not really sure if it's an egg, but then again, I've never had a bunch of dehydrated eggs before. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we have this one. This one is from everyone's favorite croissant Korean chef, Pekchan. However, surprisingly, he's all happy in this ramen package. Anyways, did you know this dude has a chain of Korean Chinese restaurants and they have been proliferating slowly into the H-marts over here. In any case, the ramen I have in front of me is a jajang ramen, so it's, fermented black bean noodles. Honestly, more tasty than what it sounds like. Essentially, you cook the noodles and, the dried vegetables first, then you rinse, and then you just add the sauce, the oil, and just mix everything all together. In terms of toppings, typical are fried dumplings with a vinegar or soy sauce dipping sauce. In terms of taste, this is probably the best jajang ramen on the market. It does have a smokiness to it, like it was fried in a wok, and overall is just a very... In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we've got this one. It's from the same makers as the ever popular Shin Ramen, but with a twist. This version leans into the seafood vibe with a noticeable dried seaweed flavor right off the bat. It even comes with an oil packet, which I'm guessing is there to give the broth a bit more richness. To keep the seaweed theme going, I actually had some kimbap on the side, which actually paired really well with this ramen. But yeah, tasting it, I gotta say, it's pretty solid. If you like dried seaweed and a seafood-based broth, this is definitely the one for you. Like, the flavor is less spicy than regular Shin Ramen. In terms of the noodles, they're a bit thinner. Honestly, they remind me of those in the small Shin Ramen cups. But yeah, overall, it's a nice change up from the usual. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we've got this one. It's called Yoryun, which you could find in most Asian supermarkets over in the States, but I like to think of it as, the spicier cousin of Shin Ramen. If you have Shin and you find it a bit boring, this one definitely kicks things up a notch. Now, it's not the kind of spicy that hurts your mouth, but it does bring a nice heat with that solid flavor. Fun fact, Yoryun in Korean means heat, like when you've got a fever, so maybe my taste buds are just permanently wrecked. But yeah, to balance the spice, I would recommend eating it with some rice, or in this case, I'm going to eat it with kimbap. Kimbap can be annoying to reheat, so I just dip it into the hot broth. The rice soaks it all up and warms up perfectly. It's low effort and super tasty. This combo of ramen and kimbap is your classic Korean fast food set, and honestly, it just hits. So yeah, if you want something simple with a little kick, keep a pack of your ramen. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we've got a bit of a twist. The package said it's a Champong ramen, so I figured it was your standard spicy seafood broth ramen. I boiled the noodles, added the dried veggies, tossed in the sauce, pretty typical stuff. But then I tasted it, and something was off. The broth was weirdly watery, and the flavor just wasn't hitting right. At first I thought maybe this brand was just, had a strange take on Champong, but then I double checked the packaging and it turns out it's a mixed Champong, meaning it's like a stir-fry ramen, not a soup. Apparently you're supposed to drain the noodles and leave with just a bit of water, so yeah, I drained it and tried it again just to see if it tasted better, even though I messed up the cooking, and it was weird. So, lesson learned, read the directions, especially with Korean ramen. In this episode of trying all the ramen my mom brought from Korea, we're revisiting the one I totally messed up last week. If you remember, I cooked a Pubim Champong, so something that's meant to be stir-fried, as if it were a regular soup-based ramen. Big mistake. This time, I actually followed the instructions, cooked the noodles, drained them, and added a bit of water like it said. I might have added a little too much, but it'll still come out fine. From there, it's pretty much the usual routine, just like making prudak. You mix the sauce packet, which comes in the same container as prudak ones. I'm guessing it's from the same company, just, different sauce and branding. But once it's all mixed, I gave it a taste, and honestly, I liked it. The seafood flavor is definitely there, a little brinier than I expected, so if you're not into that, this might not be for you. but it's not too overly sweet or too spicy, so overall a solid ramen experience.